And so with that, Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those. Oh, Chris Bishop.
Oh, thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I firstly just start by congratulating James Shaw on having his bill pulled from the ballot, and also Dr Graham on his bill. It's a good feeling. And I want to acknowledge the hard work. It's pretty obvious from reading the prefatory notes to the bill and the explanatory note that there's a lot of work that's gone in over a long period of time. I note that it makes reference to the Sarkozy Commission, which was a while ago, although we had another tilt recently. Didn't work out that well. But just want to acknowledge the hard work. Let me start at the outset of this speech, responding for the first speech for the government by saying that I agree that GDP is a flawed measurement of a country's progress, and I think that's broadly acknowledged now. And actually, Mr Shaw made mention of lots of different. Mr Tabito, the professor, says we'll stop using it then. And I'm about to come to why. Oh, sorry, it was that noted economic scholar Ron Mark. I'm about to come to why we continue to use it. I think that's broadly acknowledged. And Mr Shaw made mention of The Economist magazine and lots of other august international institutions. And actually the New Zealand government itself recognises that. So the Treasury for the last few years has been developing the Living Standards Framework, which the boffins and people involved in that area get very excited about. And so I think it's sort of Economics 101 that, for the reasons that Mr Shaw said, that if there's an earthquake in a town and you rebuild the town like happened in Christchurch, GDP goes up. But actually, have you actually improved the quality of life? Well, obviously not, because you've had a town destroyed and you have to rebuild it. But at least when you look at the numbers, it looks like things are getting better. But obviously, you're just replacing lost wealth. You're replacing lost stock and lost GDP. But the reason we keep using GDP is that it is hard to find alternatives that encapsulate as much as GDP does. So you can admit that GDP is a flawed mechanism, but you can also accept that it's something that has use and has value, and that's why, as a government, and that's why governments around the world continue to use GDP. So let me advance three reasons why this bill, I think, should fail tonight, and I want to advise the House that the national government will be voting against it. Firstly, I think it's arguably unnecessary, and actually Mr Shaw made reference to a few reasons in his own speech as to why you could say that the bill is unnecessary, because the government actually measures a lot of the things that Mr Shaw wants to measure already. So if you look at Schedule 1, which has the National Sustainable Development Indicators, and there are seven indicators and then I think 38 across the 7 sub-indicators, a lot of the stuff is already measured. We've been having a debate in the last few weeks about water, and there's a whole section which is Clause 4 of Schedule 8 about water indicators. And actually the government is strengthening the regime around water quality testing and water indicators. Air and atmosphere indicators, biodiversity, energy use indicators, for example, Clause 6. The Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment, the former MED, and before that the Ministry of Energy, long departed, has regularly published statistics about the total primary energy supply per capita, energy intensity of the economy, renewable energy as a proportion of total energy supply. That is well measured and has been for a large number of years. It's published in the New Zealand Energy Quarterly, each quarterly, and it's published in the annual update to the annual publication put out by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And that's before you even start to talk about the Environmental Reporting Act, which the government, or Parliament I should say, passed in 2015, came into force last year. Very, very robust form of environmental reporting with the measurements worked out by the government statistician and then audited by the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. And actually that filled a gap in New Zealand's statistics regime, because New Zealand was the only country, I think, in the OECD to not have a robust, independent, separate environmental reporting regime. And we had a bit of debate in the House around how robust it was and whether the government statistician should be involved and things like that. And some members have different views, but I think broadly there's consensus that we came to about the right space on that, that it fills a need and that we've done it. And we've got the OECD report card as well, which came out, I think, just a couple of days ago, or certainly this week, which measures a lot of the different things that the Green Party and that James Shaw want to advise. So the first point is that a lot of this material is captured already and it's published. And transparency is important, and sunlight's the best disinfectant, and all those cliches, and it is published. And actually, Mr Shaw made mention, he actually admitted all this, but he said that we need to import it into the Public Finance Act. But I've got to say, his reasons for why we need to import it into the Public Finance Act, I found less than convincing. So I guess in one sense it puts it all in one space, and I suppose there are some advantages to having it all in one spot, so you can literally pick up a document and say, here it all is in one space, rather than going from website to website and things like that. But that seems a reasonably flimsy reason to do something, I've got to say. And so I think this is unnecessary. The second reason I want to advance, sir, is that I do think some of what is being proposed to be included in the Public Finance Act is inappropriate, and I say that for two reasons. One is that there are too many. So there are 7 indicators with 38 or 9, I think, sub-indicators, and then there are 10 principles, that's Schedule 9, and these are the national principles of sustainable development. That's a lot to report on, and I know that might sound like a trivial complaint, but actually I think when it comes to things like the framework that our public account system relies on, the framework by which the government reports to the Parliament and seeks the appropriation of public money to run the government, I think it's important that you keep those things as simple and as clear as possible. And there's just a lot of material, and I think it would result in hopelessly confused reports. So that's the first reason about why it's inappropriate. And the second reason is, in some ways, some of these indicators are really important, but some are, by comparison, trivial. And I'm not saying they're unimportant. They're all important. Greenhouse gas intensity, native land cover, lake water quality, those are important, but some are more important than others. But they're all treated the same in the bill, and they would all be treated the same in the Act. So, for example, is it really true that packaging waste recycling, which is Clause 7 of the Sustainable Development Indicators, Clause 7, packaging waste recycling, so measuring on an annual basis the amount of packaging waste that's recycled, important, but is it really true to say that it's as important as, for example, sir, lake water quality or groundwater quality? Now, I think you can legitimately have a debate about that, but the point is the bill proposes that they're essentially of the same value, and I think in some ways the bill proposes things that are really important and things that are trivial by comparison, and that's why I say, sir, that it's therefore inappropriate to have these things in the Public Finance Act. And the third thing I would say, sir, is that I think it does in some ways undermine the purposes of the Public Finance Act. There are some highly political statements in these principles, and particularly in the principles, highly political statements that both sides of the House, I think, would contest. And you only need to look, for example, at Principle 4 in Schedule 9, which is about precaution. And there is this quite strange phrase here. I want to read it out, sir. Rejection of a lack of full scientific certainty as a reason for postponing measures to prevent the environmental degradation or restoration of ecosystems. Now, quite apart from using about 3 negatives in the one phrase, the concept of the precautionary principle is one that is contested. And actually, what this is actually saying is that we shouldn't be too scared about a lack of scientific certainty as a reason for not doing things. And actually, usually it's the Green Party that advances the precautionary principle as a reason for not doing things. So they say the science is not clear on genetic modification, for example, even though we had an entire Royal Commission back in 2000 set up by the Clark administration to look into that, and it concluded that it was safe with safeguards. So, but the Greens say we can't do it, we can't let GE into the environment. And they say fracking's not safe, even though we had the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment do a full investigation. Oh, and Stefan Browning's turned up, and we have Stefan who says homeopathy is something that we should do as a cure for Ebola and things like that. So it's the Greens don't have a great record when it comes to science as a basis for rational public policy. I've just named 3 examples: fracking, genetic modification and homeopathy. So I think it's highly contested, the idea of precaution, which is in Principle 4. So for those 3 reasons, sir, the government won't be voting for this bill.
Michael Wood.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.